What's the date, Harvey?
Today is May 15, 2023, corresponding to the 25th of ER 5783.
Okay, thank you.
How did you even start? I don't even know how you can even start it.
Well, we didn't, so I have to start over again. I'm not going to tell the same story again, but the bottom line is, Rav Asher Weiss questions is you're supposed to learn Torah Lishma for its own sake, if you can. If you can't, the Gemara says it's better to learn Shalol Lishma. Shalol Lishma will lead to Lishma, but its ideal is to learn Lishma. So let's say if a person enjoys studying Torah, he gets it's mentally stimulating. Is that called Lishma or it's not called Lishma? So he says he has two sources that say that it's not Lishma. So the first source is the Igra de Kala, which was written by the Bnei Yissaschar. Bnei Yissaschar is a famous Chassidish sefer, and he only quotes part of the piece. So I made a copy of the whole piece, or a little bit more of the piece. And on page 2, this is what he quotes. It's on the first page on the left, but this is a little bit more full. He says, the Medrash says, the Medrash Varshazu, Kad Damach Ravo, when Ravo went to sleep, which is a euphemism to mean when he passed away. Achsile Yud Gimel Afar Simon Nahari. They showed him, or maybe it means when he was about to pass away, because after he passed away, how did they have this conversation with him? So he saw 13 rivers of parsimon oil. I guess parsimon oil is a very fancy oil. So he said, who's this for? So I guess the angels told him, this is your reward in Olam Haba. Amar Elon the Avus, he said, these are for me. His name was Avuhu. Rabbi Avus. He said, this is for Avuhu. Vani Amarti Loriki Ogati. I thought that I was working for naught. L'tov v'hevel kochi. I wasted my energy on things of no value. In evolution, l'man lo niga l'rik lo neilei l'behela. Kolisi v'kolisi. Achei mishpati es Hashem. But my judgment is in the hands of Hashem. So the Bnei Yissaschar asks. He says, "V'nei advar matmim heichan shafat revavo sheyigiyaso yelurik." What does that mean? Everybody knows that there's schar v'yonesh. So what does it mean that he thought that he toiled in vain? Ve'im lo haya nir b'daita she'asa Torah reya. Oh, you know what?
It's not the same.
No, I think I left out a line here. Ve'im lo haya nir b'daita she'asa. Okay, I obviously I didn't cut and paste the whole thing. So what does it say further on? The Over Hashem Yisbar be'emes mechuyev lavod kebrad ishtala basar avui v'imei deracham lon yotzer migarme. When you serve Hashem, you have to serve like a child. U'pirsha bo shafil zochal l'bechinas ava shemisanig ma'ol me'atar v'avoda yos mikol tanugim. It's not enough that you love learning Torah more than you love anything else. V'umei ein ziv hashchina mi'bechinas al mahaba. But you could enjoy learning Torah, and it's like Olam Haba, that people who enjoy learning very much, it's as if they have their Olam Haba in this world. You can't have such a pleasure. Ravos nafshat smeya Hashem. Then you're using Torah to satisfy your own desires. You could have a Yetzer Hara to enjoy learning. It's not ideal. Rak brod ishta. You have to be like a child. That his parents he loves his parents so much. He doesn't do it because he enjoys. He loves his parents. He wants to bring the nachas. V'hine shol, and then here's go to the bottom of the page. Hine shol talmidei besh Baal Shem Tov l'Rabbim Kodesh Yisrael. Ma yasa ha'adam sheyesh lo tainig midivri Torah v'libo sos v'sameh. What should a person do if he enjoys learning? V'imkein nena me'atorah, he's having pleasure from the Torah. V'heishiv shezel miskulas ha'torah ba'atzma shehi misamechas u'masisa nefesh adam. That's part of the nature of Torah, that it goes hand in hand. That when you learn Torah, it brings you joy. Even if your intention is not to enjoy it, But that's the mitzvah of Torah, that it's Torah's misameach. So the person doesn't choose to have pleasure. God doesn't have a taina if you have hana, because you can't help it. It's not your fault. He thought that maybe he's toiling in vain because he enjoyed learning Torah. So he thought he received the whole reward. He thought he spent his whole life, but he had no olam haba left. Like I said at the dinner, that after all the covet, all my olam haba disappeared. He said, I thought I toiled in vain. But God, my judgment's in the hands of God, and God doesn't have kindness on people because they're not at fault. So it's an astounding thing that he says. That really, it's better if you could. You should turn off the simcha. You shouldn't enjoy having simcha, but if you had it, so it doesn't. The God doesn't blame you. It's not, like you can't help it. So what should you do? It's a very, very big chiddush. V'chein kasav.
Isn't there a day that would go the exact opposite? The shaila here should not be im roy lehenos, but im chayev lehenos.
Yes, of course, there's a day the exact opposite. That's what the whole thing is about.
Right. So I thought when he wrote the topic today, so I thought.
Yeah, you'll see. There's a famous eglei tal. Every yeshiva bacher knows the eglei tal. We're coming to it. The kachos of Agon Rav Chaim on page 3. The kachos of Agon Rav Chaim v'lozhin Baruch Chaim. Al Mishnah Kol Shemaisa Merubim Chachmaso Chachmaso Miskayemes V'Kol Shechachmaso Merubim Shel Maisa Ein Chachmaso Miskayemes. So Rav Chaim, on that Mishnah, Rav Chaim v'lozhin says, Kihine B'Limud Yesh Kama Pnios. There are certain biases when a person studies. Many people learn because they get paid a salary, like I do, or a kavod, or they get a lot of honor. So most people who are interested in kavod. There are very few people that study completely Shema. Most people, they study Torah because it's a mitzvah, but they have it combined with other ulterior motives. And some people, their ulterior motive is not to get kavod and not to get money. You know the famous joke about kavod. So I'm sure everybody, the rabbi. You can tell about a rabbi or about a president. He was in shul and he came home. The president came home from a board meeting, or the rabbi came home from the shul. And he tells her, they invited me and they humiliated me and they screamed at me and they embarrassed me. So she says, why are you doing it? So what's the answer? Do this for the covet. Yeah. So it's much better in Yiddish than it is in English. If you didn't get it, do this for the covet means I do it for the covet. So he says, but some people, they learn Torah for the chokhmah. Even the big philosophers will say that the chokhmah Torah is more profound than every other chokhmah. So he says, and this is the part that the Rav Asher put in bold, if the person is trying to learn Shema, even though he has Hana, he can't. It's not considered an Aveira. He says that that's what it means in the Mishnah. Kol Shemaisa of Merubim Mechachmaso. I don't know. I didn't find the sefer at home to look it up. I don't know how he's explaining the Mishnah, but he says clearly that it really that's a penia, that you have an ulterior motive, not learning Lishma, but nonetheless, it's you can't help it. It goes hand in hand. So if you can't help it, so therefore the Rebbeinu Shem doesn't have tinus. Umidivrei shneim lamadnu the ikar ma'alos Torah l'shma eina ela b'mi shalom l'kayim mitzvahs Hashem. From both the you hear you have a chassid and a misnagid. They both say the same thing. B'mi shalom l'kayim mitzvahs Hashem v'chol kavanas libo l'shem shemaim. The lishma means that you're doing it. You have no ulterior motive. You don't have no pleasure that you're looking forward to. Ach mikom Torah misamech libo shel adam. But the fact is that Torah is misamech. V'kach darka v'tiva v'neflos ma'makera. That's the nature of Torah is that it's misamech. Umishum kain hanena mitamudo ein b'zeh pegam b'olam. It's not an avera. You can't help it. Ravo thought he would have no olam haba because he had pleasure. So, but in the end, he was an inus. So God gave him his reward anyway. So who's the opposite opinion that Jack wants to know about? The Eglei Tal has the exact opposite opinion. So this is I prefer always to have the Tzuras Hadaf. The Eglei Tal. Actually, this is a new Eglei Tal. I have the old Eglei Tal at home that I bought 60 years ago. This is the Eglei Tal. The Eglei Tal was written by Rav Avram Sachachover. I think he was a Rabinowitz, no? Sachachover? Was he? The Shem Mishmur, wasn't the Shem Mishmur Rabinowitz? I don't know. Whatever it is. But in those days they didn't go by last names. He went by we could look up online. But he was known as the Sachachover Rabbi because he was the Rav of the city of Sachachov, and he wrote two very famous svarim. The Eglei Tal is on Hilchos Shabbos, and the Avnei Nezer is Shayos Teshuvos, which is on Dalet Chelkei Shulchan Aruch. He was the son-in-law of who? Anybody know? I see the people are not into Chassidus here. He was the son-in-law of the Kotzker. He was the Kotzker Rebbe's son. The Kotzker Rebbe was a super genius, and the Kotzker Rebbe was very sharp. We have very little in writing from the Kotzker Rebbe, but the little that we have, he's always very like he gives it. He's pithy, but he has he says. For example, it said by Matan Torah, it says, the people stood from afar and they swayed. So he says it means that a person could chuckle like a lulav. He didn't say a lulav, but he says like a person could chuckle, but he's merachok. You can't judge. If you see a guy chuckling a lot, doesn't mean anything.
I think he says it even sharper.
What did he say?
I think the way I've heard it was, because they were still moving and shaking. That's why they were still. That was the symbol that they were still following.
It's not the way. There's a sefer called Emes V'Emuno, which has I believe he says it in the way I quoted it, but maybe he could be quoted in more than one place. He has this. The Kotzker said, if I could remember how to go, it goes. If I am I because
you are you
because I am I, then I'm not I, you're not you. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. In other words, if my whole identity is based on what you think about me, so then I don't have an identity. I have to. He was very big. Kutsk was very, very big in MS, but he was a recluse. He went for a long period of time. He locked himself in his room, but the Avnei Nezer was his son-in-law. He was also obviously brilliant because otherwise he wouldn't have been taken for a son-in-law. And the Avnei Nezer, the interesting thing here, the Eglei Tal, the Sachachover Rebbe, his style of learning is very close to the Litvish style. He was very close. Oh, 1 second. Maybe was it the Eglei Tal was the Kotzker, or is it with the Chidush Arim? Maybe I got it mixed up.
The Chidush Arim was certainly.
The Chidush Arim was the Kotzker son-in-law. Oh, so he was the Chidush Arim son-in-law, the Avnei Nezer. That's what it must be. Yeah. So okay, I got it mixed up. Shows how big a chassid I am. So, yeah, he was the Chidush Arim's son-in-law. So, but the that's right, because and in fact the Sfas Emes, the Sfas Emes
Is the Rim son.
was the Sfas Emes quotes the Eglei Tal, the Sachat Chaver. He often quotes him. So so he wrote a sefer on Hilchos Shabbos called Eglei Tal. He goes through the first 13 Malachas HaPas, and it's a very brilliant sefer. It's very lamdish, and he has a famous hakdama. So every yeshiva bacher knows this hakdama. So here's what he writes at the bottom of page 4. Umidi dari zocher esker masha shamati ksas b'nei adam toin midarach haseichel. There are certain people that go away from what's logical. If somebody is a big mechadish, the Eglei Tal was a very big mechadish. He says if somebody's a big mechadish, and he has pleasure from being mechadish and from learning, it's not 100% lishma. It doesn't compare to somebody who doesn't have any pleasure, but he's doing it because it's a mitzvah. There's a personal pleasure that's intertwined, and therefore it's not pure. It's not lishma. It's a mistake. It's a well-known error. He says just the opposite. The mitzvah of the Torah is leo sas v'sameach v'misadik b'limudo. V'az divrei Torah nivloim b'damo. If you don't enjoy the learning, so then it's just a burden. If in order for the learning to be part of the person, which is the purpose of learning is not just to study, but it's that it should impact. Should be impactful, so you have to enjoy the learning.
He was a chassid of the Kosker, but after the Rabbi passed away, he became a Gerah chassid.
But he was a
son-in-law
son.
of Kosker, and he was a born.
He became a Gerah chassid.
But he was son-in-law of the Gary Rebbe.
The Kedushei Arim was his uncle, was the Sachat Chaver's uncle.
You were right. The Kosker was his father-in-law.
The Kotzker, he was? The Eglei Tal was the son-in-law of the Kotzker. Oh, so what? And what was the Kedushei Arim?
The Kedushei Arim was.
How was the Kedushei Arim related to the
After the
Kotzker?
Rabbi passed away, meaning the Kosker Rabbi, a Gerach, he became the Sachat Chaver became a Gerach chassid.
Oh, then he became a
Kedushei Arim.
Oh.
Also happened to be his uncle.
Oh, okay. All right, now we got it.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So me'achar, so he says me'achar. Okay, so he says me'achar shenan midivei Torah who ma'isa who nasa double guitar. By learning Lishma, he cleaves to the Torah. Uzard Hakadosh the ben Yitzhara Tov ben Yitzhara in the miskaden of simcha. The Zohar says that simcha promotes both the Yitzhara and the Yitzhara. Yitzhara miskaden mitos simcha Torah. The Yitzhara is the simcha of learning Torah is enhances or expands the Yitzhara of Torah, and the Yitzhara is if a person takes pleasure in doing averos. If you say that the simcha makes it shelo lishma, or you at the very least you'll say that it's not pure lishma. Harei simcha zu od megareya kol hamitzvah umak ora. It weakens the mitzvah. It's not. It's in conflict with the Yetzer Tov. It's not. It doesn't enhance the Yetzer Tov. The kemish Yetzer Tov misgadol mizeh bevadai zehu ikar hamitzvah. Umodina da halomed shelo lo l'shem mitzvah limuda rak mach sheyesh l'tayim b'limuda harei ze nikol limud shelo l'shma. He says if the whole purpose is because he finds it exhilarating, but he really doesn't care at all about the mitzvah, so that would be shelo l'shma. It's just like if you would eat matzah because you like matzah, but you're not doing it for the sake of the mitzvah. In such an instance, we say that shelo l'shma is you should do shelo l'shma because shelo l'shma לשלול לשמו, מתשמח שלול לשמו בא לשמו. אבל לא מדרשי מצווה ומסענג בלימודו, הרי זה לימוד לשמו וכול קודש, כי זה התענג מצווה. The reason why every yeshiva bacher knows it, because every yeshiva Rebbe tells the kids, you have to have a geschmack, you have to enjoy the learning. It's you got to get excited, you got to be engaged, and otherwise it doesn't have an impact on the person. So that's the position of the Sachet Shover. So Rav Asher Weiss is pointing out that l'chora it appears to be a machlokas between Rav Chaim Volozhin and the Bnei Yissaschar on the one hand, and the Eglei Tal on the other hand. And then so he says on page 3, he says, if you look at the left column, he says, "V'afshe Eglei Tal lo hiskar staito shel mi hu ba litchos umi hu bar plukta didei." The Eglei Tal says it's a tos mufursam. So it means that somebody had a different opinion. Who has the other opinion? So he says, "L'chari near the kamnas lotzi mima shadarish ben gilo ben doro migdol had marim bepoem bal yismach yishol." Rav Asher Weiss, his Bekias is phenomenal. So he knows the Chassidish Shvarim and the Litvish Shvarim. So he says he thinks that he was referring to the Bal Yismach Yisrael, who says, this is the quote, "Ki agomid b'Torah mevin u'makar b'pilpul svaras haTorah misani." A person is mefalpul and he has pleasure. L'zel on nikul limud haTorah avoda v'yigia v'amel. Ki b'zeh she'adam nenu lo yef lo yiga. You're supposed to be Yogei b'Torah, Amelum b'Torah, like it says. Rashi says in the beginning of this past week's parsha, she quotes in the first page. So he says Amelus implies that it's a burden. Ligros inish v'afagav l'yadam ma'kamer. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that you should learn even if you don't understand what you're learning. The Eitzel zeh halomed halofen zeh etzel nikrat avoda v'yigia v'amol ki lo yargish hataynim me'atarv. Somebody who learns and he doesn't comprehend, so then he's struggling. It's like the guy who's young yeshiva guy, and he doesn't know all the Aramaic words, and he sits there with the Gemara and he looks up at the Jastrow each word. It's not kishmak, but that's amelus. But he says, "V'kach pirish ma shetzivu chazal shetamelim b'Torah lo l'shem tainug u'simcha." Shetamelim doesn't mean that you should. It means that you're not doing it because you enjoy it. Haridinaka the ikar ma'al satar l'shma who be osek b'Torah. So that's the end of the quotation. Now it's a Rav Asher saying, you see that he holds that the ikar of Torah l'shma is if you're doing it not for pleasure. El mishum mitzvah Hashem b'vad. Ufi hamavur le'el yesh l'dvarav beisav lo rak b'divrei av hachasidus Rabbeinu habesht el af b'divrei Agon Rav Chaim mivulashin. Now I'm just gonna weigh in and tell you. I mean, okay. There's a whole long thing here. We're not going to be able to go through the whole thing, but to me it seems, if you look at on the last page, I have the Rambam in end of Hilchos Tshuva, which is a beautiful Rambam. Rambam says, and Rav Asher tries to make shalom between these two diverse opinions, although I'm not sure he doesn't exactly make them the same, but he's still, in the end, it's still a machlokas. Ram says, "Al Yomar Adam." It's the end of Hilchos Tshuva. Al Yomar Adam Marin also mitzvahs satar basu b'chachmas kedei shekabel kol brachos haksubos ba or kedei sheeskel chayom haba. Shouldn't be doing it because he wants reward. The efresh min aver shehizir Torah behen kedei shenatzim in a close exudes b'Torah kedei shelo yikars b'hem l'chavava. Em rego avod as Hashem ader. That's not the reason why you're supposed to serve Hashem. Shovet as derech Hashem who over miyur ve'eno malas hanavim lo malas cham. If the only reason you're doing it is you shouldn't get punished, then you're not doing it. It's a low level. The young children, so you scare them. You tell them, if you don't keep Shabbos, bolt of lightning is going to hit you. He says ha'ovid and halacha beis ha'ovid ma'ava osik b'Torah u'b'mitzvos v'holch b'nesivas ha'chochma lo mipnei davar ba'aylam lo mipnei yer harav lo kedei v'lo kedei lirash hatova. You're not doing it for any benefit. El also emes b'nei shehu emes v'sof hatova lo v'go. You're doing it because it's truth and you're pursuing truth. Umalazu umal gedola ma'od. Vein kol chacham zochula. Not every chacham achieves that level. V'hi malas Avram Avinu shkar Kadosh Baruch Hu ovavo l'fi sheloved Hashem oved ela me'ava. Avram Avinu was called Ohavo. He loved Hashem because he only served Hashem out of love, not out of fear. V'hi malas shetzivana Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe shenemar v'ahavta Hashem elkecha u'v'zman sheyehav adam es Hashem haruya miyad yasakol mitzvahs me'ava. If a person loves Hashem, then he's going to do all the mitzvahs miyava. So then the Ram, this is a beautiful description that the Rambam has. Ketzadi Ava. What does it mean? Avas Hashem, Haruya. What is that? He says Hu sheyava Hashem Ava Gedola Yisera Azam Od. Should have intense love. Ad shetei nafsho kshura ba'avas Hashem. His soul should be intertwined with the love of Hashem. V'nimsa shoga ba'tamid. And he thinks about it all the time. Ki'ilu chola ava. It's like he's lovesick. Yes, lovesick. She'ein daito pinuya me'avas osa isha. He compares it to a person who is infatuated or is in love with a woman, and he can't stop thinking about her. V'hu shoga b'tamid. Ben b'shifto, ben b'kumo, ben b'shalocho v'shosa. Whatever he's doing, he's always thinking about this woman that he loves. Yasem mizeh, he can't get the image out of his mind. Yasem mizeh, even more so, tia avas Hashem b'leiv ohavav. The love of Hashem should be is in the hearts of those people who love him. Shogam bo tamid. They think about it constantly, like the pasuk says. You should have to Hashem alkecha b'chol vav b'chol nafshecha. V'hu sheshlomo amar derech mashal ki cholos ava ani. This expression the Rambam said before that it's a sickness. Shlomo says it in Shir Hashirim. Ki cholos ava ani. I am sick with the love sick. V'chol Shir Hashirim mashal hu inyan zeh. And the whole Shir Hashirim, which is it seems at first blush it seems like very inappropriate. It all describes how much he loves a romantic infatuation with a woman, but it's all mashal. It's a mashal to Avos Hashem. So that's how the Rambam describes. So what I would say is that I would say that there's two types of when you talk about a person who loves to learn, whether or not it's called Shalol Shema, I would say there's two types of love that is possible, and maybe in fact maybe that's what Rav Chaim Volozhin means also. There's one type of love where let's say a person is not religious, so he doesn't believe in it, doesn't believe in Torah, he doesn't believe in God. The Koreans, they may have a fantastic time studying, and they get all excited about it, and they have a great debate and everything. So that ava has nothing to do with religious feeling. That's just so if a person enjoys the stimulation, and he goes he takes the class because he wants to challenge the Rabbi and ask him good questions. So that's Shalol Shema. But the love that a person has in studying Torah is not, when it's in its pure form, that's part of the religious experience of studying Torah. And Rav Chaim Volozhin, I'm surprised that Rav Chaim Volozhin says this, because Rav Chaim the quote that he has from him before, I would have thought he would say the opposite, because Rav Chaim Volozhin says that the highest level of dveikus is studying Torah. That was one of the big arguments between the Chassidim and the Misnagdim, is the Chassidim held that Torah is just a vehicle to have dveikus, but dveikus is on top. Dveikus is supreme. Dveikus is the ideal, and studying Torah is a way to achieve Dveikus. And in fact, the Baal Shem Tov said, "Ein adaim misha shona pirko mei pama misha shona mei pama v'achas." That there's no comparison. The Gemara says between chazering 100 times or chazering 101 times. So the Baal Shem Tov says that the achas means the Rebbeinu Shalom. You can't compare somebody who studies Torah 100 times without God to somebody who's shown a Birko Ve'apam Ve'achas. I remember in Lakewood there were these Hasidic guys. Before when they would sit down in front of the Gemara, they could sit for 15 minutes. Amar Abaye, with a niggin, Amar Abaye. They wanted to conjure in front of their eyes, like there's Abaye standing there, and it became like a whole thing that they should feel the presence of Abaye, and by extension, if Abaye was like fire, and then they felt the presence of the Shekhinah. So Rav Chaim Volozhin says that if a person wants to stop in the middle of learning, to every now and then to think about the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's okay. But he says but that's when you're learning. He says Torah Lishma means that you're focused on the Torah, not you're focused on the Deveikus. That's the whole the Nefesh HaChaim. That's his main thrust of the Nefesh HaChaim. So he says but the reason why that's so is because he says the Torah and God are not two separate entities. The Zohar says Yisrael Reis v'Kutzabarichu Chadu. There's an underlying unity between all three, and therefore when a person is studying Torah, so he's in a state of Dveikus. So what I would say is that if the person if the ava is an ava of Dveikus, where it's a religious experience, so that of course that's what the Avnei Neis are saying. That's what Torah is a way of connecting you to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So and if you're connected, your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is supposed to be one of Ava. And when you love somebody, so it's like saying if you love somebody, you enjoy being with them. So it's Shalom Lishma, and it's true. There could be selfish love, but there's also a person who loves somebody, so they love being with the person. So the ideal, the Rambam says, is that you should love Hashem like you love a human relationship, but it should be on a higher level. So part of how could you experience that if when you're learning Torah, it's dry and you're not excited and you know like the Chumash says, there's a mitzvah to remember Maimed Har Sinai. You have to remember the Maimed Har Sinai. Ramban says it's a mitzvah saseh. What do you have to remember it for? It happened 3,500 years ago. Why? So the plain pshat is because the Torah is more than an intellectual exercise; it's a religious experience. And Maimed Har Sinai remembering Maimed Har Sinai is remembering the experience of Kabbalah Torah, and feeling the presence of the Shekhinah and the Kailos of Rakim. That was all the way that God revealed Himself to mankind. So the ava that you feel when you're learning it could be Shalom Lishma ava if you're doing it just because you like a good kasha and you like if you treat learning Gemara like a crossword puzzle, so then that's Shalom Lishma. You know, there are people that love doing crossword. Not me, I'm not one of them, but there are people that on the train when I go home. So there are these people that. They could spend the whole trip doing crossword puzzles because it excites them. Even Rabbi Belsky used to do the New York Times crossword puzzle every day. Joey Schoenfeld and Rabbi Belsky used to share their Rabbi Belsky was, but he didn't need any help. Rabbi Belsky was but because he was a genius, so he enjoyed a good challenge, so he did it. But if the excitement of learning Torah, or the simcha, is totally secular, it's okay. That's Shalom Lishma. But if it's because it affects it brings you closer to Rebbeinu Shalom, and if a person learns, you're not even according to Rav Chaim Volozhin that you're not supposed to think about the Rebbeinu Shalom. but it's supposed to be a religious experience when you learn, and we've all experienced it. I'm sure that it's not just the other. If it wasn't a religious experience, there would be no daf yomi movement. It's so connected the seichel that there should be daf yomi. There's so many other things to do that are much more entertaining. There's no pictures in the Gemara except maybe in our scroll, but they're not. But those pictures are not exactly exciting. In Erevin, yeah, that's not something that grabs you. There's especially now with the internet and everything. I mean, and people's attention span is so poor. In the East Coast, there was 100,000 people at the last Siyum Shas, and these are people that it's freezing, and it reflects 7.5 years of waking up at crazy hours, getting up at 5 o'clock to learn Daf Yomi or staying up late, and people who learn Daf Yomi, no matter what's going on in their day, they manage to learn Daf Yomi. So how does that happen? It's because it's it has to be a religious experience, not just, otherwise they'd be bored to death whether you're going to study this ancient text. So I'm surprised. I don't understand. To me, it's a very big chiddush. Rav Chaim Volozhin says that if you have simcha, but the Eglei Tal says the opposite. The Eglei Tal says that is part of the essence of learning, is that you should feel the simcha, that you should enjoy. And if it's dry, then the Torah is not going to have an impact on the person. That's what he says. It's not going to be impactful if a person doesn't learn it. If it's just if he's bored, and he's a diligent worker, but he's bored, so it won't have that type of impact.
Modern educators of young children.
What?
Modern educators of young children clearly hold like the Eglei Tal.
Yeah, you have to make it. You have to get them engaged. Yeah, whatever way you could do to get them engaged is. I don't know. That's okay. So let's see what else. What he quotes here. He says, on where are we? On the bottom of page 3. He says, I have to tell you also that, I mean, you probably, you had your Rebbeim, I had my Rebbeim. Every single Rabbi that I had, their love of Torah was unbelievable. I mean, Rav Chaim Shulevitz, for example, his Avos Torah was, you can't even describe it. He was, like nothing else existed for him. That was his whole world. There's the famous story of Rav Chaim, that when he was on the boat coming after they left Shanghai, and Rav Chaim first came to, I think, to America or Canada, before he went to Eretz Yisrael. He was in America, I think, for 2 years or a year. So he was, Rav Chaim used to pace back and forth. Even in the Beis Medrash, in the mirror, he used to pace back and forth, and you could see the wheels were turning inside his, and then when he would stop after like a half hour, and I mean I heard him say that he would say Adank. He's talking to Marsha. Thank you. So his learning wasn't in the abstract. He was engaged with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he was on the boat, and he was up on deck, and he was pacing back and forth. So somebody was very impatient with the trip, and he said, where are we? Or maybe he said in Yiddish, Avu Haltman. So he said, we're in the sixth shar of the Shev Shmaitza. You know, Shev Shmaitza is seven chapters. So he was, where you up to? Where are you? Yeah. So he didn't say, we're an hour away from the Statue of Liberty. He said, in fact, he said, Rav Chaim has in the Sefer, I don't remember exactly, he says that for a child, right? It says in the Chumash, Kasher Yisa Umen Esatinok, that the way a nursing mother carries a child, that Moshe said, you told me that I should carry Klal Yisrael. So he says that a child, a baby, is wherever the baby is in the mother's arms. What's going on outside is separate, but the baby, you asked if the baby could talk, where are you? I'm in my mother's arms. He says that's how a person is always supposed to feel, that they're in the arms of Rebbeinu Shalom. They're always in the mother's arms. So his Avos Torah was so intense. I had the opportunity to speak and learning with Rav Shmuel Birnbaum, Zichron Baruch, a few times. His son-in-law was a good friend of mine, Ruven Shimansky, and we were in the bungalow colony together. And Rav Shmuel used to come up for Shabbos, and he would grace us with a shir on Shabbos. And so I spoke to him learning a few times. I once remember Shabbos afternoon I was working on the Sugi and Brachos and Daf Lamed Hey with Machokas Rishimon Yochai and Rishmal about Malach Nasi De'achem. So he said, well, Yom V'Layla. So I was talking Shabbos afternoon, and his eyes closed and his head fell down, and he kept on talking and learning to me. Like you could see he was asleep, but he was still talking and learning. They said that the Vilna Gaon was used to talk and learning when he was asleep.
Can he used to learn entire Masechtas in his sleep?
Yeah.
He'd get up in the morning,
Make a scene.
and he make a siyum in the morning. He said,
Really?
he didn't speak. He said he'd bring me a kos yayin because he had to make a work different.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the same thing. So I mean, the Ahavas HaTorah, and when you saw Rav Shmuel Birnbaumer, you saw Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. I mean, that the glow on their face was from Torah. That's what it was from. It was from but it wasn't disconnected from the Rebbeinu Shalom. That was it was the vehicle for them to have a relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Okay, let's see what Rav Asher Weiss says. He says, and let's do page 3, the next to last paragraph on the left. I'm the Beker Mashachok Tzadiki Poland. He says that the tzaddikim of Poland, the Avnei Nezer was Sachachover was in Poland. He in fact I was at the kever of the Sachachover. Because the Sachachover, I think I was at his kever. I think he's buried in Kutsk. I was for sure in Kutsk when Fagin and I went with the members of the shul to Poland. So we went to Kutsk. So Kutsk I know is in Poland. That's how I know it's in Poland. So, but I think that we went. I think that Sachachover was also buried there. But anyway, he was from Poland. So the and the sefer that he quoted before, the Yismach Yisrael. Does anybody know who that was? Which Hasidic Rebbe he was?
Alexander.
The Alexander. So they were both from Poland. So he says Beikar Mashe Nechukul Tzadiki Poland Ibidi Italia Haviyamina the Elu ve'Elu Divikin Chaim Ain't Stira Bein Zelzeh. There's no contradiction. Why? The Michad Gisanira Baru Anias Daiki, the Iker Darkish Torah, Talmuda Dveikuso Hu Shetay Ha'adam. It's part, the way you become Davik in Torah is having pleasure. V'yishtashea b'Talmudo. And you, it's like a child who plays with a toy. But that shouldn't be the reason why you learn. The reason why you're learning is because it's a mitzvah. Well, mitzvah so Adam. You go to page 5. A person is required to learn all of Torah. Even there are many parts of Torah that are very dry. And you can't be mefalpol chadish shalusada. You can't be mechadish chadushim. Ve'ein bein shnayim ochsim shebo chitzukah ha-mechadshim ve'mikukah ha-mamikim. And there's probably more Torah on the Tosis in the beginning of Shnayim Ochsim. There's a famous Tosis, and there's who knows how many Chedushi Torah was said on that Tosis. The Rav Lezer Yudel Finkel, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir before Rav Chaim Shlomo was never the Rosh Yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva was Rabbanish. He was Rav Lezer Yudel's son, and Rav Lezer Yudel was the Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael. In Europe, who was Rosh Yeshiva in the Mir? It was I don't remember who was Rosh Yeshiva in the Mir in Europe, but Rav Lezer Yudel was the Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. So Rav Lezer Yudel loved B'nai Torah. He had tremendous ahava for B'nai Torah, and he loved to hear Divrei Torah from them. And he would pay them for Divrei Torah. They would come and they had a set of Dvar Torah. So I think I heard this from his son-in-law. That was Rav Nassim Tzvi, I was able to be his charusa. So Rav Lezer Yudel said that he heard 1,500 different shtiklach Torah on Shnayim Ochsim B'Talos and that Tosis about Zom B'Kulashali and then Yacholku. It's a toast by Yachoku. So so he says there's no difference in terms of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah between studying Shnai Melchim B'Talus, Uperek El Trefus, Sheikra Halacha HaMushtefes Al Masoras V'Hilchasa. El Trefus is all about the anatomy of the animals and what our Masorah is and what makes the kosher treif. It's not the most exciting topic, El Trefus, but it's part of Torah, and there's, even though a person doesn't have the same gishmak, but he says v'chayev ha'adam lilmod Torah lo rak b'idan chedvasa u'v'mochen degadas. A person should be studying Torah not only when he's excited and he's broad-minded. El af b'shas mochen dekatnas. There's an expression in the Zohar, mochen degadas, mochen, small-minded and large-minded. When a person's heart is closed and he's unable to experience the pleasure of Torah, there's still a mitzvah to learn. There's a chiv to learn Torah no matter in all circumstances. But it's nonetheless, it's definitely better that he should be v'simcha. So I don't understand. I don't know. Does he mean to say that there's no machlokas? That's what he seemed to be saying before, that there's no machlokas, but it can't be that there's not. I mean, the Egleit House says that you should be dafka have simcha, and the but Reb Chaim Volozhin said that you can't help it that you have simcha, but it's better to learn that even though you have simcha, you still, and certainly the Bnei Yissaschar said that you're an oinus. If you have simcha, it's not called, God doesn't punish you because you can't control it. So if it's something that you should pursue, so you don't have to say that you wouldn't be punished because you can't control it. So but what he's saying, I mean, I would say that of course the Egleit Tal would agree that the mitzvah, even if you don't have a gishmak, you still have a mitzvah to learn. But when I was in Philadelphia yeshiva, so the yeshiva was Shmuel Kamenetsky Shlita and Rabbi Yisfei Zatzal. So I had a chaver who got into what we call rifyon. He got into a rut, and he found it very difficult to learn. So he went to Rebellion and he said, I can't learn. I have no gishmak. So what should I do? So Rabbi said, who said you have to learn with gishmak? Learn without gishmak. You don't have gishmak, so learn without gishmak. So you have to learn anyway. But I would say, even though Rosh Hashanah says it's a machlokes for us, I would say, if you ask me, we should definitely follow the Egleit Tal. That's good enough for me. That the more a person enjoys the learning, the more excited you become about the learning, the more impactful it is. And that again, I would say that excitement is not a intellectual excitement because you just you like a good mystery or a good riddle. That excitement comes from the inherent kedusha. That's when you're learning Torah, you're connecting to Rebbeinu Shalom in that manner. He says in the next paragraph, he says, Kach kos l'chad meitkifi kamoy v'chedusha Rabbeinu Avram ben Nahar. He quotes Rabbeinu Avram ben Nahar. Rabbeinu Avram ben Nahar was a sefer that was discovered, I think maybe about 100 years ago. The Rishonim do not quote him, and the Shulchan Aruch doesn't quote him, and then none of the earlier poskim, the Taz and the Shach and the Magen Avraham, they don't quote Avram ben Nahar. But they discovered the sefer. The Miri also they didn't have. And then they published now on Rabbi Blau, was the one that published this is Rabbeinu Avram ben Nahar on the Dharam. Rabbi Blau used to sell his farm in Lakewood. He used to come to Lakewood. He used to walk up and down the aisle with his farm. So he told us that he found the manuscript in the Vatican, and they wouldn't allow him to make a copy. I don't even know if they had copy machines then. I don't remember. But this goes back 1970. What?
They do now.
I know they do have copy.
Now.
What?
Vatican.
Where in the Vatican? And
I mean, in
well, they didn't. They wouldn't allow him to even write it down. So what he did was, he would have photograph memory. he would go in, take out the sefer, and read it, and memorize the page, and then he would go out and write it down, and then would go back in and read the next page. That's how he painstakingly patched together the whole sefer. So, but the so he was one that was that published Rabbeinu Avram Nahar as well as many on the Dharm and many other sectors. One of my Rebbeim was Rav Nachum Partzovich, one of the Rosh Hashivas in the Mir, and Rav Nachum was a very big Igli, and he loved Rabbeinu Avram Nahar. He knew Rabbeinu Avram Nahar. I remember talking to him and learning. And he told me Rabbeinu Avram Nahar discusses this in the Dharma Daf Gimel and Daf Zayin and Daf Yud Aleph and Daf Tez Zayin and in Shavuos. The Dharma Shavuos are very similar, closely. And then he told me eight places in Shavuos where Rabbeinu Avram quotes it. He was very big into Lashonos, and he enjoyed seeing how Rabbeinu Avram Nahar expressed things. So what does he say? V'ikaman da makshev v'heichen asam likros b'sfarim. So this is a big topic. Okay, we're not going to have time to go into it. The Gemara says mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu, that a mitzvah was not given for hana, and therefore, if you if you make a neder not to have hana from let's say from a shofar, so the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that you're allowed to blow the shofar, and in order to be yotzei the mitzvah. Why are you having hana from the mitzvah? You're being yotzei the mitzvah shofar, but mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu. The mitzvah wasn't given for hana. The only time you say mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu is if the hana is the hana of the spiritual hana. But let's say the mitzvah combines, for example, let's say a mikvah. If you made a neder not to have hana from a mikvah, so the Ran says in the Dharm that you don't say mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu, because there's two separate things. There's the mitzvah, there's the hana of the mitzvah, but there's the hana of going into a cold mikvah on a hot day. Or if you made a neder not to eat matzah, so you don't say the mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu when you can eat the matzah, because there's inherent hana. But if it's just the spirit, but when you blow a shofar, it's not the shofar that you enjoy; it's the mitzvah. So the question is, the Gemara in Durv seems to say that if you make a neder not to read somebody a sefer, you're not allowed to read the sefer. So why don't you say mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu? So the Rabbeinu Avram Nahar says v'alo mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu the lav kushu the loshach time of the mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu el b'matzah shu tluy b'maisa. When it comes el b'mitzvah, I'm sorry, she tluy b'maisa, a mitzvah that has to do with an action, you can say mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu. Kisha adam also einim miskaving l'davar hana she'ena also hana skufa el lasus mashin itzam es Hashem. He's not doing it for physical pleasure. So, kamosha pirashta be'el mutarin. Avo mitzvah limud shehu inyan tzivui halev v'yediyas emes. It's a mitzvah atzir halev. Learning is something that the heart it has to capture the imagination, the heart, and the intellect. Ikar hatzivui hu kidei l'tzayir ha'emes u'lehisaneg v'lehanos b'mado l'shma l'smach b'levavo b'sichlo k'diksiv pikudei Hashem yishar misam chayv. That's the Gemara. The reason why an Avos is not allowed to study Torah during the Shiva is because, and on Tisha B'Av you're not allowed to study Torah. It's because the pasuk says pikudei Hashem yishar misam chayv. The mitzvahs Hashem are misameach the heart. Mishum hachi, he says mishum hachi avo asur likra b'Torah u'mediim ksuvim b'nei shehem misamchin libo shel al korcho hilkol kol shaykh meimar b'mitzvahs tamad lo nitlan hana sheikar mitzvaso hu hi ha'ana v'hatanug b'meh shemasig u'mevim limudo hilkol kishehadiro zeh ezeh o heidu zeh asur likros b'sefer asur she'akorcho magas lo hana mimenu. So mimumono. So he says that here the hana is inherent to what. Whereas if you do a mitzvah, so the hana is separate. There's the mitzvah and there's the hana that you're mekayim the mitzvah. And we say mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu, but you can't because the purpose of the mitzvah is not to have hana. But here that is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to enjoy, to be engaged and feel the pleasure of learning. So therefore he says that you wouldn't say mitzvah slav lehenes nitnu. It's a little bit hard to understand his explanation for why there's no mitzvahs Rabbanis in it, but it has to do with it. I mean, in general, there's no mitzvahs Rabbanis in it. It was a little hard to understand. Well, we don't have time to go into that. But whatever it is, he clearly says that the Iker mitzvasu he ha'ana. And then he says next, Harigon the Lozu Bavad the Kach no the Kach Ya Kedivei Gital the Zeh Iker mitzvahs Talmud Torah she Yismach v'Yisane b'Tamud. Okay, we'll see. Maybe next week we'll finish the topic. Okay.